You would never have imagined the shocking outcome. A racist waitress refused to serve a homeless black man, but just 30 minutes later, the unexpected arrival of Shaquille O'Neal turned everything around, sparking a twist that stunned everyone. The crash of glass shattered the night. It wasn't the sound itself that froze Lauren's blood. It was what followed. Her daughter's scream, piercing and terrified from upstairs. "Maya!" Lauren dropped the stack of dinner plates she'd been carrying to the kitchen sink. They clattered against the countertop as she bolted toward the stairs, taking them two at a time. Her heart pounded against her ribs, her mind racing through terrible possibilities. Had someone broken in? Was Maya hurt? The hallway stretched endlessly before her, the door to Maya's bedroom partially open, a sliver of light spilling out. Another crash followed by a man's voice, low, threatening. "Where is it? Tell me where it is, or I swear to God." Lauren burst through the door. The scene before her unfolded in horrifying clarity. A man in a black mask stood over Maya's bed, his gloved hand gripping her daughter's arm. Maya's eyes, wide with terror, found Lauren's. The intruder whirled around. "Mom!" Maya sobbed. The man lunged toward Lauren, who instinctively grabbed the heavy ceramic lamp from Maya's desk and swung it with every ounce of strength she possessed. It connected with the side of his head with a sickening thud. He staggered, but didn't fall. "You shouldn't have come home early," he snarled, his voice oddly familiar beneath the mask. Before Lauren could process this, he shoved her hard against the doorframe. Pain exploded in her shoulder. He vaulted past her, thundering. "Down the stairs, call 911, Lauren shouted to Maya as she pursued him, ignoring the throbbing in her shoulder. At the bottom of the stairs, the intruder hesitated, glancing toward the kitchen. Lauren's presence in the house had clearly disrupted his plan. He bolted for the front door instead, yanking it open and disappearing into the night. Lauren reached the door just in time to see him sprinting down the street toward a dark sedan. As he pulled off his mask to enter the car, the porch light briefly illuminated his face. Recognition hit her like another physical blow. Shaquille, her ex-husband, Maya's father, the man who'd promised 3 years ago that he would never contact them again after what he'd done, the man who was supposed to be serving time in a federal prison 5 states away. She stumbled backward into the house, slamming and locking the door. Her hands trembled violently as she pressed her back against it, sliding down until she hit the floor. "Mom?" Maya stood at the top of the stairs, phone clutched in her hand. "Mom, the police are coming. Are you okay?" Lauren couldn't find her voice. How could she tell her daughter that the monster who had just terrorized her was her own father? How could she explain that the past she'd worked so hard to bury had just crashed back into their lives? And most importantly, what was Shaquille looking for in their home? 3 years earlier, Lauren Brennan had been Lauren O'Neal, wife to Shaquille O'Neal, rising star at Meridian Financial Group. Their life in Philadelphia's affluent society, Hill neighborhood had been picture perfect, a restored colonial townhouse, membership at the right clubs, and 12-year-old Maya thriving at her prestigious private school. The cracks in that perfect veneer had been visible only to Lauren. Shaquille's increasingly unpredictable moods, the late nights at the office that he refused to discuss, the way he'd check his phone obsessively, angling the screen away from her. When she'd tried to broach these concerns, he'd dismissed them as paranoia, suggesting that perhaps she should talk to someone about her anxiety. She might have continued believing him if not for the call from Detective James Garcia. He'd asked to meet her at a coffee shop while Shaquille was at work, explaining that he couldn't discuss the details over the phone. "Mrs. O'Neal," he'd said once they were seated in a quiet corner, his expression grave. "I'm investigating a series of financial crimes connected to Meridian Financial, specifically evidence of money laundering for organizations involved in human trafficking." The world had tilted beneath her. There must be some mistake. "My husband is an investment manager, not... We have evidence that your husband has been moving funds through a series of shell companies. I'm sorry to tell you this, but he's been under surveillance for months." She'd felt physically ill. Why? Are you telling me this? Shouldn't you be arresting him? Detective Garcia had leaned forward, lowering his voice. We need more than what we have. Your husband is careful. The accounts we've identified are only a small part of a larger operation. We believe he's keeping records somewhere, possibly at your home. You want me to spy on my husband? The question had emerged as a whisper. I'm asking you to think about whether you've noticed anything unusual. A locked drawer he's protective of, a computer he doesn't let you use, trips to a storage facility. There had been something. Shaquille's office at home. He'd installed a new lock on the door 6 months earlier, claiming he needed a secure place for client information. She'd never questioned it. If what you're saying is true, then my daughter and I have been living with... She couldn't finish the sentence. Detective Garcia's face had softened. Mrs. O'Neill, I understand this is difficult, but if your husband is involved, you and your daughter could be at risk. These organizations don't hesitate to eliminate liabilities. That night, while Shaquille attended a client dinner, Lauren had picked the lock to his office, a skill left over from a rebellious adolescence she rarely thought about. Inside, she'd found nothing immediately incriminating until she'd noticed the edge of a document peeking out from beneath the carpet. Pulling it back revealed a hidden safe in the floor. She didn't have the combination, but she knew what was inside. And that was enough. The investigation moved quickly after that. Shaquille was arrested at his office 2 days later. The evidence from the safe, account numbers, contact information, detailed records of money movements had been damning. What had shocked Lauren most was learning how long it had been going on, nearly 5 years, half their marriage. Throughout the trial, Shaquille had maintained his innocence, claiming he was being framed by colleagues, but the evidence was overwhelming. He'd been sentenced to 15 years, with the possibility of parole after 10. The last time Lauren had seen him was in the courtroom. He'd stared at her with cold, empty eyes as the verdict was read, mouthing 3 words that had haunted her ever since. I'll find you. After the trial, Lauren had sold the townhouse, changed her and Maya's last names to her grandmother's maiden name, and moved them to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, close enough to Philadelphia that Maya could occasionally see her friends, but far enough that they could start fresh. She'd found work as an administrator at a local college, a significant step down from her former position at an architecture firm, but one that allowed her more time with Maya, who needed her desperately. Money. Transition hadn't been easy. Maya, at 13, had struggled to understand why her father, whom she'd adored, had done such terrible things. She'd cycled through denial, anger, and profound sadness. Therapy had helped, but some wounds remained unhealed. Lauren had her own battles, nightmares, trust issues that sabotaged a promising relationship with a history professor at the college. The constant fear that somehow, despite the distance and new identities, Shaquille would make good on his threat. For the past year, they'd finally found some stability. Maya, now 15, had made new friends and joined the school's debate team. Lauren had been promoted to director of admissions. They'd established routines, inside jokes, favorite spots in their new town. The shadow of Shaquille O'Neill had begun to recede. Until tonight, when that shadow had materialized in Maya's bedroom, shattering the fragile peace they'd built. The police swarmed their home for hours after the break-in. Lauren had expected skepticism when she identified the intruder as her presumed incarcerated ex-husband, but instead, the responding officers had exchanged grim looks. Mrs. Brennan, said Officer Collins, a middle-aged woman with shrewd eyes, Shaquille O'Neill escaped from federal custody 3 days ago during a transfer between facilities. It wasn't made public yet because they thought they had him contained to the Ohio area. The revelation had left Lauren speechless. 3 days. He'd found them in just 3 days. After the officers left, promising increased patrols in the neighborhood, Lauren had secured every window and door, then joined Maya in her room. Her daughter sat cross-legged on her bed, arms wrapped tightly around herself. It was him, wasn't it? Maya asked, her voice small. Dad. Lauren sat beside her, pulling her close. Yes, sweetheart, it was. He didn't even recognize me at first, Maya whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. He kept demanding to know where it was. When I didn't answer, he shook me and then..." She broke off, shuddering. "Did he say what he was looking for?" Maya shook her head. "Just it. He said you had something that belonged to him and he wanted it back." Lauren's mind raced. What could Shaquille possibly think she had? They'd left everything behind in Philadelphia. Unless a memory surfaced. The night before Shaquille's arrest, he'd come home late, agitated. He'd spent nearly an hour in his home office, then joined her in bed, unnaturally calm. The next morning, while he was in the shower, she'd noticed his laptop bag looked unusually full. When she'd mentioned it, he'd snapped at her, something he rarely did in front of Maya. Had he hidden something that night? Something the police never found? "Mom." Maya's voice pulled her back to the present. "What are we going to do?" Lauren tightened her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "We're going to pack a bag. We can't stay here tonight." "Where will we go?" A name came to mind immediately. James Garcia, the detective who'd started it all 3 years ago. They'd kept in sporadic contact, a few emails, Christmas cards. He'd been promoted to lieutenant with the Philadelphia Police Department. "I know someone who can help us," Lauren said, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. "Someone who knows what your father is capable of." 2 hours later, they were heading east on the Pennsylvania Turnpike toward Philadelphia. Maya had finally fallen asleep in the passenger seat, her face troubled even in slumber. Lauren's eyes constantly flicked to the rearview mirror, searching for headlights that stayed too close for too long. James had agreed to meet them immediately, though his voice had carried a note of caution when she'd explained the situation. "You need to go to the local authorities, Lauren. This is their jurisdiction now." "I did," she'd replied. "But you know Shaquille better than they do. You know what he's involved with." "Please, James." He'd relented, directing her to a hotel in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, just across the river from Philadelphia. "Don't use your credit cards," he'd warned. "I'll book the room under my name." As the city lights of Philadelphia appeared on the horizon, Lauren's thoughts turned to what Shaquille might be searching for. Money? Records that could implicate others? Whatever it was, she didn't have it, but Shaquille clearly believed otherwise. More troubling was how easily he'd found them. They'd been careful. New names, new city, few connections to their old life. Yet he'd tracked them down with terrifying efficiency, which meant they weren't safe anywhere he could follow. The weight of this realization settled over her as she exited the turnpike. Their lives had just been uprooted again, and this time running might not be enough. James Garcia hadn't changed much in 3 years, still solidly built, with salt and pepper hair cropped close to his scalp and deep worry lines between his eyebrows. He was waiting in the hotel lobby when they arrived, dressed in jeans and a dark jacket rather than the suits he'd worn during the investigation. After quick introductions to Maya, who regarded him warily, he escorted them to a room on the 4th floor. Once inside, he did a thorough check of the space before settling into a chair by the window. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said. Lauren recounted the break-in while Maya sat silently on one of the double beds, picking at a loose thread. On the comforter. When she finished, James leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "The timing isn't coincidental. O'Neill's escape was sophisticated. Outside help, falsified transfer documents. This wasn't impulsive, it was planned." "But why now?" Lauren asked. "He's been in prison for nearly 3 years." "That's what I intend to find out." James pulled out his phone, checking something. There have been developments in some cases connected to O'Neill's operation, several arrests in the past month. It's possible he's trying to protect himself or recover something valuable before others get to it. Maya spoke up unexpectedly. "He said Mom had something that belonged to him, but we don't have anything." James's gaze shifted to Lauren. "Are you certain? Nothing unusual came with you from Philadelphia? Nothing he might have hidden without your knowledge?" Lauren shook her head, then hesitated as another memory surfaced. "There was one thing. After Shaquille was arrested, I found a USB drive taped beneath Maya's desk drawer. I assumed it was something innocent, family photos maybe, but when I tried to access it, everything was encrypted. I couldn't open a single file." "Where is it now?" James asked sharply. "I kept it, but I haven't touched it in years. It's in my jewelry box at home." James stood abruptly. "That's likely what he's after. If it contains what I think it might, names, accounts locations, it would be invaluable both to O'Neill and to the organizations he worked with." "But I can't access it," Lauren protested. "What good would it do him?" "He'd have the decryption key," James replied grimly. "Or know someone who does." Maya had gone pale. "So he'll come back to our house looking for it?" "Yes," James confirmed, "which is why I need to retrieve it before he does. Lauren, I'll need your keys." She hesitated. Something in his urgency unsettled her. "Shouldn't we let the FBI handle this? If Shaquille's escaped federal custody, of course they're involved," James cut in. "But bureaucracy moves slowly. O'Neill could recover that drive while agencies are still coordinating their response." He extended his hand. "I'll go tonight. You and Maya stay here. Doors locked." Reluctantly, Lauren handed over her house keys. As James moved toward the door, she asked, "What happens after you get the drive?" He paused. "We use it as leverage. O'Neill wants what's on it. We can use that to draw him out." "Draw him out?" The phrase chilled her. "You want to use us as bait?" "No," James said firmly. "I want you and Maya safely out of the picture, but the drive is our best chance of finding him before he hurts someone else." After he left, Lauren secured the hotel room door and tried to settle Maya for sleep. Her daughter curled on her side, staring at the wall. "I can't close my eyes without seeing him standing over my bed," Maya whispered. Lauren stroked her hair, heart breaking. "I know, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. Do you think James will catch him?" "I hope so." But doubt gnawed at her. Something about this situation felt wrong. Shaquille's sudden appearance, James's intense interest in the USB drive. There were missing pieces to this puzzle. Long after Maya had finally drifted off, Lauren remained awake, laptop open as she searched for information about Shaquille's escape. There wasn't much, just a brief mention on a Cleveland news site about an investigation into a security incident during a prisoner transfer. On impulse, she typed Meridian Financial into the search bar. The results made her sit up straighter. The company had been in the news recently, not because of Shaquille's old crimes, but because of a major acquisition by Sterling Global Investments. The merger had been finalized just last week. Why did that feel significant? She typed in another search, Sterling Global Investments Ownership. She scrolled through several corporate profiles before finding what she was looking for. The CEO and primary shareholder was Richard Sterling, a name she recognized from Shaquille's trial as someone who had provided a character witness statement but was never implicated in the crimes. Lauren's pulse quickened. Could the merger be connected to Shaquille's escape? Was there something on that USB drive that could threaten people involved in the acquisition? She was still mulling this over when her phone buzzed with a text from James. "Got it. Back in an hour." Relief washed over her, followed quickly by renewed unease. What would happen once James decoded the drive? Would they finally be free of Shaquille's shadow, or would it pull them deeper into danger? She couldn't shake the feeling that they were pawns in a game whose rules they didn't understand, and that the next move might be devastating. Sleep eventually claimed Lauren, though it was shallow and disturbed by dreams of shattered glass and masked intruders. She woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous night came rushing back. The digital clock on the nightstand read 7:43 a.m. Maya still slept beside her, face finally peaceful. Lauren reached for her phone to check for messages from James. Nothing. No texts since his message about retrieving the drive, which had come through around 1:30 a.m. He should have returned hours ago. She slipped out of bed and tried calling him. The call went straight to voicemail. Unease bloomed into worry. A soft knock at the door made her jump. "Room service?" called a woman's voice. "We didn't order anything," Lauren replied cautiously. "Complimentary breakfast, already paid for by Mr. Garcia." Lauren approached the door and peered through the peephole. A hotel employee stood in the hallway with a covered tray. After a moment's hesitation, Lauren opened the door, keeping the security chain engaged. The woman, young with a hotel name tag reading Tara, smiled apologetically. "Sorry to disturb you so early. Mr. Garcia arranged this last night. He also asked me to give you this." She held up a small envelope. Lauren unhooked the chain and accepted both the envelope and the tray. After locking the door behind her, she set the tray aside and tore open the envelope. Inside was a note in James's handwriting. "Change of plans. Meet me at Franklin Square, 10 a.m. Bring Maya. Critical development." The brevity of the message amplified her concern. Why hadn't he called? And why Franklin Square, a public park in the heart of Philadelphia? Maya stirred, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. "Is that breakfast?" Lauren forced a smile. "Yes, James sent it." She handed Maya a plate, trying to keep her voice steady. "He wants us to meet him in Philadelphia this morning." "Did he find the USB thing?" "I think so." Lauren hesitated, then decided Maya deserved honesty. "But something feels off. He's not answering his phone." Maya set down her fork, food forgotten. "You think something happened to him?" "I don't know," Lauren admitted. "But we need to be. Careful. Get dressed after you eat. We'll head out soon, but we're going to make a stop before meeting James." While Maya ate, Lauren mentally mapped their next moves. The hotel was in New Jersey, about 20 minutes from Philadelphia. If they left by 9, they'd have time to make a crucial detour. An hour later, they were crossing the Ben Franklin Bridge into Philadelphia. Instead of heading directly to Franklin Square, Lauren navigated toward the Philadelphia Police Department headquarters. "Why are we going here?" Maya asked, anxiety evident in her voice. "To make sure James is who he says he is," Lauren replied grimly. The suspicion had been growing since she'd awakened. James's behavior the previous night, his urgency to obtain the USB drive, his insistence that they not involve federal authorities immediately, had initially seemed like the actions of a dedicated officer. But in the cold light of morning, other possibilities had emerged. What if James was no longer on the right side of the law? What if his interest in the drive wasn't about catching Shaquille, but about what it contained? At the police headquarters, Lauren approached the front desk with Maya close behind. "I need to speak with Lieutenant James Garcia. It's urgent." The desk sergeant looked up from his computer. "Lieutenant Garcia? There's no lieutenant by that name here." Lauren's stomach dropped. "He's with major crimes. Detective Garcia, maybe? He was promoted in the last few years." The sergeant typed something, then shook his head. "We have a Sergeant James Garcia in narcotics, but he's been on medical leave for 3 months. Cancer treatment." The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. "That's not possible. I spoke with him last night. He met us at a hotel in Cherry Hill." Concern crossed the sergeant's face. "Ma'am, are you saying someone is impersonating a Philadelphia police officer?" "I don't know," Lauren whispered, mind racing. "I thought he was. We knew each other during my ex-husband's trial. Shaquille O'Neal, the Meridian financial case." Recognition dawned in the sergeant's eyes. "That was a federal case. If you're worried about your safety, you should contact the FBI field office. They're just a few blocks from here." Lauren checked her watch. 9:40 a.m. The meeting at Franklin Square was in 20 minutes. Whatever was happening, she couldn't risk bringing Maya anywhere near it. "Is there somewhere safe my daughter can wait while I speak with someone?" she asked. The sergeant nodded and made a call. Minutes later, Maya was settled in a break room with a sympathetic officer, while Lauren was escorted to an interview room to meet with Detective Sarah Nguyen, who specialized in witness protection cases. Lauren quickly explained the situation. Shaquille's escape, the break-in, meeting with a man she believed was James Garcia, and the discovery that the real James was on medical leave. Detective Nguyen's expression grew increasingly grave. "Mrs. Brennan, I need to make some calls immediately. The man you met with is almost certainly working with your ex-husband. This meeting at Franklin Square, it's a trap." "But why go through all this?" Lauren asked, bewildered. "If he has the USB drive, he may not have been able to decrypt it," Nguyen suggested. "Or there might be something else he needs from you. Knowledge you have that you don't realize is significant." As Detective Nguyen left to coordinate with federal authorities, Lauren sat alone in the interview room, thoughts churning. What did she know that Shaquille or his accomplices might need? She'd been completely in the dark about his criminal activities until the investigation, unless the night before Shaquille's arrest, his unusual behavior, the laptop bag that had seemed too full. What if he'd hidden something else that night? Something she was meant to find but never did? The door opened and Detective Nguyen returned with a man in a dark suit who introduced himself as Special Agent Reeves with the FBI. "Mrs. Brennan," he said without preamble, "we've been searching for Shaquille O'Neal since his escape. We believe he's working with a former associate named Thomas Weaver, a man who previously worked undercover in various law enforcement agencies, providing intelligence to trafficking networks." The description matched the man she'd known as James Garcia perfectly. "We need to move quickly," Agent Reeves continued. "We'll send a team to Franklin Square, but we need your help. Is there anywhere else O'Neal might go? Anywhere significant to both of you that isn't obvious?" Lauren thought hard. "Our old house in Society Hill was sold years ago. He has no family in the area anymore." Then something clicked. "But there's a cabin in the Poconos. Shaquille inherited it from his grandfather. We spent a few weekends there early in our marriage, but he lost interest in it. I don't think it was ever mentioned during the trial." Agent Reeves nodded to a colleague who immediately left the room. "We'll check it out. In the meantime, we're arranging secure transport for you and your daughter to a safe location." "No," Lauren said firmly, surprising herself. "I want this to end today. If Shaquille wants to meet, let's give him what he wants, but on our terms." The plan came together quickly. Rather than sending a team to apprehend James at Franklin Square, they would allow the meeting to proceed. With Lauren wearing a wire and surrounded by undercover agents, Maya would remain safely at police headquarters. "You don't have to do this," Agent Reeves emphasized. "We can find O'Neal without putting you at risk." But Lauren was resolute. 3 years of living in fear, of looking over her shoulder, of watching Maya struggle with the trauma of her father's betrayal. It had to end. "I'm tired of running," she said simply. At 10:15 a.m., Lauren sat on a bench near the central fountain at Franklin Square. The spring day was pleasantly warm, the park filled with tourists and local families. Children laughed on the carousel nearby, the sound at odds with the tension coiling in her chest. He appeared precisely on time, approaching from the western entrance of the park. The man she'd known as James Garcia wore sunglasses and carried a takeout coffee cup, the picture of casual confidence. "You're late," he said, taking a seat beside her. "And where's Maya?" "Safe," Lauren replied shortly. "Where's the USB drive?" His mouth tightened. "Secure. Did you tell anyone about our meeting?" "No, but I went by the police station this morning. Interesting news about Lieutenant Garcia. Apparently he's been on medical leave for months." A flicker of surprise crossed his face before his expression hardened. "So you know it doesn't change anything. Shaquille still wants what belongs to him." "And what's that exactly?" "Because I don't have anything of his." "Stop playing games, Lauren." His voice remained conversational, but a dangerous edge had crept in. "The access codes. Shaquille embedded them in something he gave you before his arrest, something personal." Lauren's mind raced. Shaquille hadn't given her anything in the days before his arrest. No gifts, no mementos. They'd barely been speaking. Wait. That wasn't quite true. The morning of his arrest, he'd handed her a small velvet box at breakfast. "Happy anniversary," he'd said with a tight smile. Inside had been a pair of sapphire earrings that hadn't matched anything she owned. She'd thanked him awkwardly, surprised he'd remembered their anniversary at all given how distant they'd been. She'd never worn them. After his arrest, she'd packed them away with other jewelry she no longer wanted, jewelry she'd brought too. Lancaster, despite its painful associations. "The earrings," she murmured. "But they're just earrings. The stones are lab-created sapphires with microscopic engravings, access codes to offshore accounts containing over $30 million, money that certain people are very eager to recover. And Shaquille sent you to find them?" The pieces were falling into place. "You helped him escape." The man smiled thinly. "Let's just say our interests aligned. Now, are the earrings at your home in Lancaster?" "No," Lauren lied smoothly. "They're in a safety deposit box in Philadelphia." doubt crossed his face. "You're lying." "Why would I lie? I want this over. With as much as you do. Get me the USB drive, I'll get you the earrings, and then you and Shaquille can disappear forever." He studied her, clearly weighing his options. "Fine, we'll go to the bank together." "No. You go get the drive from wherever. You've hidden it. Meet me at the Rittenhouse Hotel lobby in 1 hour. I'll bring the earrings, you bring the drive, straight exchange." After a moment he nodded. 1 hour. Come alone or I'll find Maya next, and I won't be as gentle as Shaquille was. He stood and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Lauren remained on the bench, heart hammering. Through her earpiece she heard Agent Reeves. "We've got him. Agents are following. You did great, Mrs. Brennan." Lauren exhaled slowly. Phase 1 complete. Now came the difficult part, returning to Lancaster to retrieve the earrings before the meeting at the Rittenhouse. With FBI agents escorting her, they rushed to her home. The house had been thoroughly searched by local police after the break-in, but nothing else appeared disturbed. Lauren went directly to her bedroom, pulling out the jewelry box she kept in her closet. Buried beneath rarely worn necklaces and bracelets was the velvet box containing Shaquille's last gift. The sapphire earrings gleamed coldly in the light. Agent Reeves examined them with a small loupe. He wasn't lying. There are micro-engravings here, not visible without magnification. Our tech team will need these. "Will you be able to make replicas in time?" Lauren asked. "We already have someone working on it," he assured her. "The fakes will be ready for the exchange." By the time they returned to Philadelphia, it was nearly time for the meeting. In a suite at the Rittenhouse Hotel, Lauren was fitted with another wire while Agent Reeves briefed her one final time. "Remember, your only job is to make the exchange. Once you have the USB drive, signal by mentioning your daughter's name. We'll move in immediately." Lauren nodded, surprising herself with her steady hands. Fear still coursed through her, but it was now tempered with resolve. This would end today. The hotel lobby was bustling with afternoon check-ins when Lauren arrived. She took a seat in the lounge area, placing a small gift bag containing the fake earrings on the table before her. He arrived 5 minutes late, scanning the lobby before approaching. He sat across from her, placing a manila envelope on the table. "The drive?" Lauren asked. "The earrings first." She pushed the bag toward him. "Your turn." He opened the bag, examining the earrings briefly, before tucking them into his jacket pocket. Then he slid the envelope to her. Lauren opened it and found the USB drive inside. It looked exactly as she remembered, a plain black drive with no markings. "Now what?" she asked. "You and Shaquille disappear with your 30 million? His smile was cold. "Something like that." "Then I hope it's worth it, because Maya and I will keep looking over our shoulders for the rest of our lives, won't we? He'll never really let us go." At the mention of Maya's name, movement erupted around them. FBI agents converged from all directions, weapons drawn. "Federal agents, don't move!" The man lunged across the table, grabbing for Lauren, but an agent tackled him before he could reach her. In seconds, he was face down on the marble floor, hands being cuffed behind his back. Agent Reeves appeared at Lauren's side, guiding her away from the commotion. "We got him, and teams are moving on the cabin in the Poconos right now. This is almost over." Lauren nodded numbly, adrenaline draining away and leaving exhaustion in its wake. "I want to see Maya." "Of course. We'll take you to her now. And Mrs. Brennan." Agent Reeves looked at her with newfound respect. That was incredibly brave. The raid on the cabin yielded results within hours. Shaquille O'Neal was apprehended trying to flee through the woods behind the property. The FBI also discovered evidence linking him and his accomplice, whose real name was indeed Thomas Weaver, to the organization that had funded his escape. Maya and Lauren were reunited at a secure FBI facility, where they stayed for 2 days while the investigation continued. The USB drive proved to contain not only evidence of the original money laundering operation, but also documentation of new criminal enterprises established during Shaquille's imprisonment, operations that involved executives at Sterling Global Investments, explaining the timing of his escape. The acquisition of Meridian Financial would have exposed these connections, Agent Reeves explained. O'Neill's associates needed those offshore accounts moved before the merger completed its due diligence. On the third day, they were cleared to return to Lancaster with an FBI security detail that would remain in place until Shaquille's transfer to a maximum security facility was complete. As they drove home, Maya sat quietly beside Lauren, gazing out the window at the passing landscape. "Will we have to move again?" she finally asked. Lauren considered the question carefully. "Not unless you want to. Your father will be in a facility with much higher security this time, with additional charges that will add years to his sentence. But he found us once." "He had help," Lauren reminded her, "and now that help is gone." Maya nodded slowly. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about him standing over my bed, not even recognizing me at first. He wasn't there for me at all. I was just in the way." The pain in her daughter's voice broke Lauren's heart. "Maya." "No, it's okay." Maya turned to face her. "It helped, actually. For years, I've had this idea that somewhere inside him, he still cared about us. That maybe he was sorry. But he's not. He never was." She took a deep breath. "And that makes it easier somehow to let go." Lauren reached for her hand. "Letting go doesn't happen all at once. It's okay if it takes time." "I know." Maya squeezed her hand in return. "But I don't want him to have power over us anymore. I don't want to keep running." As they crossed the bridge into Lancaster, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the road. Lauren felt a weight lifting, not completely gone, but lighter than it had been in years. The sound of broken glass that had shattered their peace would echo for some time to come, but the fragments would no longer cut quite so deeply. Their house looked different when they pulled into the driveway, familiar yet somehow changed, as if seen through new eyes. The FBI agents did a thorough sweep before allowing them inside. Lauren walked through each room, taking inventory of the space that had been violated. Maya lingered in the doorway of her bedroom, reluctant to cross the threshold. "We could redecorate," Lauren suggested gently. "New paint, new furniture arrangement. Make it feel different." Maya nodded, but her eyes were fixed on the spot where her father had stood. "What if we just moved me into the guest room for now?" "Of course," Lauren said. "Whatever makes you comfortable." That night, after settling Maya in the guest room with fresh linens and her favorite pillows, Lauren sat alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet except for the occasional murmur of the FBI agents positioned outside. She opened her laptop and navigated to a real estate website, not because she intended to flee again, but because she wanted options. Maybe staying in Lancaster was right, but maybe a fresh start somewhere entirely new would be better for both of them. Her phone buzzed with a text from Agent Reeves. Initial interrogation complete. O'Neill refusing to cooperate, but Weaver talking. "You're safe." Lauren exhaled slowly, relief washing through her. She typed back a simple "thank you" before closing her laptop and heading upstairs. She paused outside the guest room, listening to Maya's even breathing through the partially open door, then continued to her own bedroom. As she prepared for bed, Lauren caught her reflection in the mirror. She looked tired but somehow stronger, a woman who had faced her worst fear and survived. She thought about the Lauren of 3 years ago, shell-shocked and terrified in the aftermath of her husband's arrest, and marveled at the distance between then and now. The earrings that had caused so much trouble were now in FBI custody, their microscopic secrets being used to dismantle whatever remained of Shaquille's criminal network. The fear that had been her constant companion for 3 years was still present, but diminished, a shadow rather than a solid presence. In the morning, she and Maya would begin rebuilding again. But this time, they would build on a foundation of courage rather than fear, of confrontation rather than evasion. The sound of broken glass would fade, replaced by the steady rhythm of their lives moving forward, together, no longer running from the past.